They told us 4 nuns disappeared in 1985. But the family always said there were 5, and now, 40 years later, someone just mailed me a letter. No return address. No explanation. Just a faded envelope, signed only with a cross, and a name we were never supposed to say out loud. The 5th sister wasn't missing. She was erased. And now, I'm going to find her. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury, and make sure no name stays forgotten. The rain had started again, soft and steady, tapping the clay tiles of the old Ruiz home like it always did in spring. Gentle, familiar, mournful. Lena stood in the doorway of her late grandmother's attic, blinking away the sting of dust and grief. The house felt different now. Emptier, not just quiet, but cleared out in some permanent, spiritual sense. She hadn't planned to come back to San Diego so soon. Or at all, really. But when her grandmother passed, peacefully, they said, in her sleep. Lena was the only Ruiz left who knew the difference between heirlooms and junk. She also knew the attic hadn't been touched in over 3 decades. The first thing she noticed was the crucifix still nailed above the entry beam, faded but upright. The second thing was the scent. Cedar, old paper, a trace of mothballs, and something else. Wax, maybe. Or incense. She pulled the chain light and stepped inside. Everything was as she remembered. Dusty boxes marked in her grandmother's sharp Spanish cursive, a broken rocking horse, an unused sewing machine still wrapped in cellophane. On the far end, half buried beneath old Easter decorations, was a small cedar trunk. Not the fancy kind, plain, worn, and locked with a delicate latch. Lena hesitated. It looked like the kind of box you weren't supposed to open, not without permission. But her grandmother was gone, and her mother hadn't spoken to Lena since she left the church. She undid the latch. Inside, wrapped in yellowing cloth, was an old Canon AE-1 film camera. Next to it lay a folded rosary, its beads worn smooth by time. Beneath that, a Bible, leather cover cracked, spine broken, its pages brittle and red-stained. And then, at the very bottom, a small envelope. No address, no postage, just 4 words written in blocky, slanted ink. For Celeste. I kept my promise. Beneath, a single letter. Monsieur Lena stared. Her breath caught in her throat. Celeste Ruiz, her aunt, her mother's older sister, one of the Mission 4, as the press had briefly called them. The 4 nuns who vanished during a trip to northern Mexico in 1985. Official story: rebel violence, local chaos, no bodies, no evidence. Just silence. Lena hadn't known her. She was born years after the disappearance, but the grief had lived in her home like a second religion. Her grandmother rarely spoke of it. Her mother never did. And yet here, in a sealed box her grandmother had kept hidden for decades, was this. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of thin stationery, brittle but legible. The handwriting was rushed but careful. The Spanish was old-fashioned and formal. Lena read silently. Sister Celeste, if you're reading this, then I did not come back, or perhaps I chose not to be found. But I want you to know I kept my promise. We were 5, not 4. You always said the world should know the truth. I never had your courage, but I remember everything. I saw everything. I still carry it all. The church will never speak of it. They'll say we were lost. Some will call us runaways. But I have prayed every day since, because I know that what happened in the valley was not God's will. It was man's silence. If I am still alive when you read this, I will be where the sun touches the Pacific at dusk, near the broken bells. Forgive me for staying hidden. I only wanted to survive. Monsieur Lena folded the letter slowly, like it might disintegrate. Her mind reeled. We were 5. The The words pressed like a weight against her chest. She had spent the past year finishing a master's in theology at Loyola Marymount, writing a thesis on truth-telling in ecclesiastical history. And yet here, in a forgotten attic box, was something no book or seminar had ever prepared her for. A crack in the official story of her own bloodline. A question history hadn't asked. 4 women went missing. But what if there was a 5th? One the church had never acknowledged? She picked up the camera and turned it over. There was film inside. She knew enough from school to handle it carefully. There might be something here. Photos undeveloped for 40 years. Memories someone had tried to leave behind. Lena turned back to the Bible. Its front page was inscribed in flowing pen. Property of Hermana Celeste Ruiz. Congregación de Nuestra Señora de la Paz. The last passage marked Psalm 42. Deep calls to deep in the roar of your waterfalls. All your waves and breakers have swept over me. Her grandmother had locked this box away. Intentionally. But not to erase her daughter's memory. To preserve it. To protect something that wasn't ready to be told. Until now. Lena stood in the attic's dim light. Heart pounding, rain tapping on the roof overhead. Somewhere near the Pacific coast, by broken bells, was a woman who might still be alive. A woman who claimed to have witnessed the true fate of 4 missing nuns. A woman who signed her name only with an M. Lena whispered into the shadows, not fully aware she was speaking. Who were you? She closed the box carefully, wrapped it in the protective cloth, and held it to her chest. She knew what came next. Not a decision, a calling. The parish office of Nuestra Señora de la Paz smelled of lemon polish and old incense. Lena sat across from a secretary who wore thick glasses and kept glancing at the wall clock behind her. The woman's fingers tapped the armrest of her chair like she wanted the meeting to be over before it began. I told you, the woman said in Spanish. We don't give access to personnel records, especially not to the press. I'm not press, Lena replied patiently. I'm family. Celeste Ruiz was my aunt. That name, Celeste Ruiz, landed like a stone between them. The woman's face softened slightly. Yes, I remember her, but that was many years ago. So much has changed since the 80s. So many have come and gone. 4 sisters disappeared on that mission, Lena said quietly, and no one ever told us what really happened. The secretary shifted. They were in northern Mexico. It was dangerous then. Guerrilla groups, bandits. The police could not even search properly. 4 were named, Lena said, choosing her words carefully. But I found a letter that says there were 5. The woman's fingers froze. Her gaze lifted, sharp now. The clock behind her forgotten. Lena leaned in. Did you ever know a Sister Pilar? The secretary stared at her for a long moment, then stood abruptly. Wait here. She vanished into a back hallway. Lena let out a slow breath. The name hadn't been in the letter, but her grandmother's Bible, stuffed between a page and the spine, had a small note. Just one line. Pilar was never supposed to be on the roster. The door creaked open again. A man in black clerics entered, thin, silver-haired, wearing the collar of a diocesan priest. His expression was cautious, measured. You are the niece? He asked in English, with only the faintest Spanish lilt. Of Sister Celeste. Lena stood. Yes, I'm Lena Ruiz. I'm trying to understand what really happened to her and to the others. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just asking questions. The priest gestured for her to sit. I am Father Daniel Ortega. I knew the sisters, all 4 of them. 4, Lena repeated. He nodded slowly. That was the number registered. That was the number sent to El Mirador on June 14th, 1985. 4 women, each with years of service. Sister Celeste, Sister Amalia, Sister Rosa, and Sister Teresa. And Sister Pilar. At that, his eyes closed. Just for a moment. There was a postulant, he said quietly, a young woman training with them in the months before the mission. She was unofficial. No vows yet. Her papers weren't processed. So she wasn't counted. She wasn't supposed to go, he said, rubbing his brow. But she insisted. Sister Celeste vouched for her. The mission was short, just 10 days. Bishop Alvarez approved it informally. No one expected trouble. But you remember her. I do, he said. Quiet, serious, a limp in her left leg. She had been in an accident as a girl. The others called her Hermana Pilar, though I don't know if it was her real name. Lena's pulse quickened. She survived, didn't she? He looked at her then, really looked. His voice dropped. If she did, she never came back. The diocese received word of the disappearances. Armed men had raided the orphanage compound. The mission house was burned. No bodies were found. It was decided that the church would mourn and move on. Without an investigation? There was an investigation, he said, but not the kind you'd want. The government didn't want attention on rebel groups. The Vatican didn't want attention on American nuns being sent into danger. And Sister Pilar? Lena whispered. He hesitated. The bishop told me not to file her name. Said she had no official standing. Said if we buried the story would stay buried. A silence stretched between them. I'm not here to blame you, Lena said. But I found something. A letter from someone who called herself the fifth sister, and I think she's alive. Father Daniel's face paled. She said she kept her promise, that she saw everything, and she wrote it to Celeste. He stood slowly, walked to the window. She was the only one who tried to come back, he said after a long pause. I received a letter once, just one. No return address, no signature. It simply said, "Forgive me, I couldn't carry them all." I didn't know what to do with it. So I burned it. Lena's voice caught. Why? Because I was afraid. Because I knew what it meant. And because I thought, maybe silence was kinder. He turned back to her, his voice raw. I was wrong. Where do I go? Lena asked. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a faded folder. Inside, a single note. Santuario de las Campanas Quebradas, the sanctuary of the broken bells. It's an old cliffside chapel in Baja California, he said. It hasn't been used in years, but that's where her trail ends. If she's alive, she's there. Lena took the note with trembling hands. Why now? He asked softly. Because I think she wants to be found, Lena said. Because it's time. And because silence had reigned long enough. The convent had been abandoned for 26 years, but the key still worked. Lena turned it gently in the rusted lock, surprised when the thick wooden door of Nuestra Señora de la Paz gave way with a reluctant groan. Dust spilled into the air as if exhaling a secret. The main hall was smaller than she remembered from family photos, a narrow nave with splintering pews, sun-faded banners still clinging to the rafters. On the altar, a chipped statue of the Virgin leaned slightly to one side, her face calm despite the neglect. Lena stepped inside, her boots echoing on the cracked tiles. This was the last place all 5 women had stood together, or maybe 4 officially. 5 in truth. The air smelled like old stone, dry wood, and time. She moved slowly, not sure what she was looking for, only that she had to look. The convent had been partially maintained for a few years after the disappearances, enough to keep the lights on. Then funding stopped. The remaining sisters were transferred. The compound sealed, and no one ever came back, except now, Lena. She passed the old kitchen, its sink rusted, pots still hanging like quiet ghosts. The infirmary was empty, cots stripped bare. Everything felt paused, not abandoned, like the women had stepped out and simply never returned. In the north wing, she found the dormitories. Each room still bore a name etched on the wood in neat calligraphy. Celeste, Rosa, Amalia, Teresa. No Pilar. But one room stood open with no name at all. Smaller, tucked between the laundry area and the storage closet. Lena stepped inside. The bed frame was bare. A small wooden crucifix lay on the windowsill, and in the corner a broken cabinet leaned sideways, half blocking a cracked section of wall. She almost didn't notice the scrap of paper wedged between the cabinet and the stone. It was brittle, torn, folded like it had been hidden in a hurry. She unfolded it slowly. Faint ink in Spanish. The silence is worse than fear. Obedience doesn't feel holy anymore. She said to wait, to let them decide. But I feel like something is coming. Something we won't be able to undo. I want to leave, but I promised her I'd stay. One of us has to watch. There was no signature, no date. But Lena knew. This had been written by the fifth sister, by the one who hadn't left a name. Sister Pilar, if that had been her real name, had watched something, had stayed when she wanted to run. And something had happened that none of them had been able to undo. Lena sat on the bare bed, letter in hand, heart pounding. There was more here. More than memory. More than sorrow. This was a place frozen in unfinished prayer. She could feel it in the stillness. She rose and walked to the chapel attached to the convent, the same one from the old family photographs. The walls were damp, the stained glass long removed, but the altar still stood, flanked by decaying candles. Beneath the altar's edge, she saw something faint, scratched into the wood, barely visible unless the light caught it just right. 5 crosses, one for each sister, and below them, carved in the same hand, God sees even what the church buries. Lena touched the inscription gently. If Sister Pilar had carved this, it was a message to someone, to anyone who might come after. A declaration in a place that had seen too much silence. A sound made her freeze. A soft footfall from the entrance. She turned quickly. An old man stood just inside the threshold. Weathered face, sun-stained hat in his hands. "Señorita," he said in a raspy voice, "you shouldn't be here. This place is not safe anymore." "I'm not here to steal anything," Lena said quickly. "My aunt lived here, Sister Celeste." The man blinked, as if the name stirred something long buried. "Celeste Ruiz," she said again. "She disappeared in 1985, with 3 other nuns." He nodded slowly. "See, I remember. Everyone remembers. We just stopped talking." "Do you remember a 5th woman?" "Younger, limp in her leg." The man's eyes narrowed. "You mean La Callada, the quiet one?" Lena's breath caught. "Yes." She didn't speak much, not even to the other sisters. "I think something had broken her before she ever came here, but she smiled sometimes, when she watched the sea. Do you know what happened to her?" He paused, then looked away. After the others vanished, she came back. Just once. Walked straight through that door and sat in the chapel alone for hours. Didn't speak, didn't pray. Just sat. Did anyone talk to her? No one dared. We didn't understand what had happened. We just let her sit. Where did she go? The man looked back at Lena. His eyes were tired but clear. She walked down to the coast that evening, toward the cliffs, toward the old mission with the broken bells. I never saw her again. Lena felt her chest tighten. That matched the letter, where the sun touches the Pacific, near the broken bells, the sanctuary of the broken bells. She left a letter, Lena said quietly. She said she kept her promise. The old man nodded. Then maybe she's still waiting for someone to finally ask. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, worn and familiar. A rosary. "The quiet one gave me this," he said. "Said to hold it until someone from her family came." Lena reached for it with trembling hands. The beads were carved from olive wood. The crucifix scratched and faded. but the initials on the back were clear. M.A. Thank you, she whispered. The man tipped his hat and walked out the way he came. Lena stood in the chapel's fading light, the rosary clutched in her fist, the weight of the past growing heavier in her heart. The fifth sister had been here. She had survived. She had returned. And now Lena had the trail. Next stop, the cliffside mission. Next stop, the truth. The coastal road south of Ensenada hugged the cliffs like a tight-lipped secret. Lena drove slowly, hands firm on the wheel, her mind replaying every detail from the convent and the chapel, especially the note, the 5 carved crosses, and the old man's final words. She walked toward the broken bells. There were no towns on the map, just a thin line of gravel branching toward the ocean, narrowing with each mile. Her GPS blinked out 15 minutes back. Eventually the path ended at a stone arch choked with vines. A weathered sign leaned sideways on rusted nails. Santuario de las Campanas Quebradas, established 1891, abandoned 1972. And behind it, cloaked in sea mist and encroaching wildflowers, stood the mission. Time had not been kind. The once white walls were streaked with moss. The bell tower had collapsed, its rusted fragments scattered in the grass like broken teeth. One bronze bell lay face down near the edge of the bluff, cracked in half. But the wooden doors, though swollen from years of salt and wind, were still closed. Lena approached slowly, a leather satchel at her side. The rosary looped around her wrist. The ocean murmured below, endless and indifferent. She hesitated at the door, then knocked. Nothing. She knocked again, this time louder. Still silence. She was about to turn away when a sound stopped her, a soft shuffle, like a chair being moved across stone. Then the creak of metal, and finally, the door opened. Standing before her was a woman in her 60s, gray hair cut close, skin weathered by wind and sun. A plain blue scarf draped loosely over her shoulders. Her posture was careful, cautious, but it was the eyes Lena noticed first. Sharp, watching, alive. The woman said nothing. Lena spoke softly, in Spanish. I'm looking for someone who was here, a long time ago. Her name may have been Pilar. A long pause. Then the woman's gaze dropped to Lena's wrist. She saw the rosary. The air between them changed. Who gave you that? She asked, voice hoarse with disuse. A man at the convent. He said you gave it to him to keep until someone came. Another silence. I'm Lena Ruiz, she said gently. My aunt was Sister Celeste, one of the 4 women who disappeared in El Mirador. The woman's breath hitched, just slightly. Lena continued. You left her a letter, a promise. I found it. The woman's face, still unreadable, lowered. She stepped back without a word, leaving the door open. Lena entered. The mission interior was bare but clean. Wooden beams, stone walls. A single candle flickered near a faded altar. There were signs of life. A folded blanket on a cot, a tin mug on the table, a battered radio with frayed wires. Why are you here? The woman asked quietly, standing near the window. I want the truth, Lena replied. No articles, no documentaries. I just want to understand what happened to my aunt. And to you. The woman closed her eyes. When she opened them, they shimmered with memory. You should leave, she said. The truth doesn't heal. It only opens what people have spent their lives sewing shut. Maybe, Lena said, but I think you want it told. Otherwise, you wouldn't have left a trail. A long silence, then, My name was never Pilar, the woman said. It was Maria de los Angeles. Lena felt the shift in her chest. A name, a real one. I joined the congregation in 1984. I wasn't supposed to take my vows until the next year, but Celeste, she believed in me. Said God calls the heart before the church stamps the paper. Her voice cracked on the next words. She was the only one who listened. Lena sat down slowly on the edge of the pew. What happened in El Mirador? Maria de Los Angeles stared out at the sea. The mist curled through the broken bell tower like a veil. We were sent to assist a local orphanage, she said. Just 10 days. The 4 sisters and me. We arrived June 15th. The compound was poor. Walls crumbling, food scarce. But the children, she smiled faintly. They sang like angels, even when they were hungry. What went wrong? Maria's hand tightened on the windowsill. On the 5th day, men came, armed, faces covered. They said they were protecting the village from the army. Said we weren't welcome. They threatened to return. And they did. 3 nights later, Maria whispered. After dark, we heard shouting. Then glass broke. I remember Sister Rosa screaming. Someone hit me from behind. She paused, closed her eyes. When I woke up, I was tied in the mission cellar. Celeste was there too, and Amalia. The others were gone. They'd taken Teresa earlier. Rosa was dead. I think she fought back. Lena felt her throat tighten. What did they want? To make an example, Maria said. They said foreign women bringing their religion had no place in their revolution. They thought we were spies or missionaries. And Celeste, Maria's eyes filled. She kept us calm. She sang to us, even when they brought her back bloodied, even when they... She broke off. I escaped, she said finally. During a storm. The ropes were loose. I found Celeste barely breathing. She told me to go. Said if I stayed, they'd kill us both. Maria turned from the window, voice shaking. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned. I found a small church near the village. They helped me get back across the border. And you never told anyone? I tried, she whispered. But no one wanted the story. Not the police, not the church. They said it would cause scandal, that it was too dangerous to pursue. So you disappeared. I didn't want to, she said, but I had no papers, no name, and too much guilt. Lena was silent for a long moment. Then she pulled the blood-stained Bible from her satchel and laid it on the pew between them. This was my grandmother's, she said. It belonged to Celeste. She kept it all these years, along with your letter. Maria sat down slowly beside her. Her fingers traced the worn cover. I failed her, she murmured. She saved me, and I hid while the world forgot her. You survived, Lena said gently. You remembered, and you left a trail. Tears welled in Maria's eyes. Then help me tell it right, Lena said. Not in headlines, in testimony, so they're not just the Mission 4 anymore. So they're not lost. Maria nodded slowly. I'll tell you everything. The recorder clicked on with a soft hiss. Lena sat at the far end of the wooden table inside the old mission, notebook open, pen poised. Maria de Los Angeles, formerly known only as Sister Pilar, sat across from her. Her posture was straighter today, not proud exactly, but less folded in. The night before, they had stayed up in silence. Maria had lit 3 candles by the window. One for Celeste, one for Rosa, one for Teresa. She hadn't spoken much after that, just prayed in a whisper Lena couldn't quite hear. Now, daylight crept through the ruined chapel roof, gold filtering through green. Maria inhaled deeply. You have to understand, she began. We weren't supposed to be there. Not officially. Lena nodded. You mean the church didn't sanction the mission? The local bishop did, quietly. He had ties to the orphanage's founder, Father Ortega's cousin. But it was off the record. No Vatican oversight. No emergency plan. No rescue if something went wrong. Exactly. Maria's hands tightened around her cup. When we crossed the border, I remember Sister Celeste looking back, just once, like she already knew something was waiting. Lena jotted down the line, even as a chill ran through her. She said, "God leads even through the valley of shadows, but we mustn't go in blind." I didn't understand what she meant, not until the last night. What happened that night? Maria looked down. We had been warned. The local priest told us men had been seen on the outskirts, armed, angry. Celeste told us to fast, to pray, but we stayed. She paused, then added quietly, "We thought staying meant faith, but it also meant risk, real, bloody risk." "And what of your vows?" Lena asked. "Your name was never listed in the church records." Maria looked up slowly. "I had taken my vows," she said. "Not publicly, not with ceremony, but in the convent, 3 weeks before we left. Sister Celeste and I knelt before the altar at midnight. She blessed my rosary. She anointed my palms. I took the same promises every sister makes." "And no one knew?" "Just her, and Sister Amalia, who witnessed." Lena was silent. "That night," Maria continued, "when I was tied up in the mission cellar, I kept whispering them to myself, over and over." She looked at Lena, voice unshakable now. "Poverty, chastity, obedience, and silence if it meant survival." The last line lingered in the air like smoke. "Celeste protected me because I was the youngest," Maria said, "but also because I was unrecorded. The church could forget me more easily. No scandal, no questions. So they chose not to investigate. They sent a delegation," Maria said bitterly. "A man in a suit, a priest from Mexico City. They asked the villagers questions in daylight while soldiers watched. No one said a word. The mission was closed, the orphanage was burned, and then..." She made a gesture with her hand, like wiping chalk from a blackboard. "They told us, let them rest, don't reopen wounds, obedience." "But what about your family?" Lena asked. "Surely someone..." "My parents were gone. I had no one. The convent was my only home. When I returned to the border, I was told I had never existed in their records. A clerical error, they said." Maria laughed softly, without joy. Celeste always said obedience was sacred, but also dangerous when it served silence more than truth. Lena leaned forward. "Do you still believe?" The question landed like a stone. Maria didn't answer immediately. She turned her gaze toward the broken bell tower, where a bird flitted through an open beam of sunlight. "I believe," she said at last, "that God does not vanish when we are abandoned by men. I believe he wept when we were taken. I believe he weeps still." Lena's throat tightened. "I used to think faith meant answers," Maria added. "Now I think it means refusing to stop asking." She reached for the recorder and turned it off. "That's enough for today." Lena nodded. Outside, waves crashed against the cliff. The sea did not pause to listen. But Lena did. That evening, as the sun dipped into the Pacific, Maria lit another candle. "For the unnamed ones," she said. And Lena, for the first time in her adult life, bowed her head. Not to a church, not to a system, but to a woman who had survived what should have broken her. A woman whose hidden vows had outlasted the ones sung from pulpits. The hospice in Tijuana was quiet. Too quiet. Even the air conditioning whispered like it was afraid to wake the dying. Lena signed in at the front desk and adjusted the scarf around her neck. She had called ahead, requesting a brief visit. The nurse had hesitated. He's not always lucid, but ultimately agreed. The man she had come to see didn't have much time left, and maybe, just maybe, he was ready to talk. She was led down a hallway painted in soft yellows and blues, until the nurse stopped in front of a half-open door. "Be gentle," the woman whispered. "He still thinks he's in a rectory sometimes." Inside, the room was small and neat. A single crucifix hung above the bed. A Bible rested on the nightstand, its pages flagged with aging bookmarks. And lying there, pale against the linen sheets, was Monsignor Jaime Cordova. He had once been a powerful figure in the regional diocese. Now he looked barely more than bone and breath. But his eyes opened when Lena stepped inside, and there was a flicker of recognition. "You're the Ruiz girl," he said, voice thin but clear. "The one asking about the nuns." "I am." He gestured for her to come closer. She did. "I thought you might come," he murmured. "The past always returns, especially when it shouldn't." "I need to know what you buried," Lena said gently. "Please, my aunt deserves the truth. So do the others." He looked away, into the corner of the room. "They told me it was for the good of the church, that no one would benefit from scandal, that the world forgets women anyway." He gave a bitter smile. "But Celeste Ruiz never let herself be forgotten. Not in my conscience, not in my prayers." "You knew there was a fifth," Lena said. "Of course I knew," he whispered. "I met her, Maria de Los Angeles. She was a child with the eyes of someone twice her age. I remember the limp, the way she held herself like she wasn't allowed to take up space." He shifted in bed, wincing from the effort. "She survived," he said. "I got the report. A low-level contact in the Mexican government told me she crossed the border 2 weeks after the raid. But the orders came down fast, from Rome, from Mexico City. She wasn't official. No record. The 4 who disappeared were a tragedy. But she was a liability. So you erased her." "I obeyed," he said. Lena's jaw clenched. "That's not the same thing." He looked at her again, directly now. "No evasion." "No," he said. "It's not." There was a long silence. "I have something for you," he added. "In the drawer." Lena stepped to the nightstand, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a small leather-bound book. Its cover was cracked. Inside, handwritten pages filled with uneven script. "A journal," he said. "My own. I kept what I could, letters, memos, the names they wanted me to forget." Lena flipped through it. Some pages were simple reflections. Others detailed internal church discussions, political pressure, orders from higher offices. It was clear. The decision not to investigate further had been deliberate. On one page, a single quote stood alone. "Sometimes obedience is the language of cowards." "I wrote that after reading her letter," he murmured. "The one Maria sent me. I kept it too long, then I destroyed it." His voice was trembling now. "She begged me not to forget. And I did." "You can still help," Lena said softly, "by letting me tell the truth." He gave a soft laugh. "My name means nothing anymore." "It doesn't have to." He reached out, and she took his hand. "You remind me of her," he whispered. "Celeste. Fierce, when she believed in something." Lena felt tears rising but held them back. "She never stopped believing," she said. "Not even at the end." His hand gripped hers more tightly. "Then tell it, all of it. Don't let them vanish again." Lena nodded. As she turned to go, he called after her, his voice barely more than breath. "I'm sorry." She looked back. "For what I did and didn't do." "I believe you," Lena said. "But I won't let your silence be the last word." That night, back at the cliffside mission, she handed Maria the journal. Maria turned it slowly in her hands, as if weighing its past. "So he remembered," she said. "He remembered everything." They sat outside in the salt-tinged wind, 2 women from different generations, joined by bloodlines of grief and faith. The waves below sang a rhythm older than any vow. Maria opened the book, read the first few lines, then closed it. "Will you publish it?" "Only if you want me to." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "But not for me," she said. "For them." Lena understood. For Celeste, for Rosa, for Amalia, for Teresa, and for the 5th sister who lived in silence long enough. The photograph was faded and grainy, printed on matte film stock that had likely passed through dozens of hands before finding its way into Lena's satchel. A local shopkeeper in Baja, after hearing about her search, had handed it over wordlessly from the back of an old metal drawer. "You should see this," he'd said. 5 women sat on a stone bench outside a whitewashed chapel. 4 of them Lena knew well. She had seen their faces for years in family photo albums and the occasional archived news clipping. Celeste Ruiz, serene and strong-jawed. Sister Amalia, sharp eyes behind small glasses. Sister Rosa, smiling too broadly for the camera. Sister Teresa, the youngest. Thin, sunburnt, her hands folded in her lap. And then there was the 5th. She sat on the end, angled slightly away, her chin tilted down. A headscarf obscured her hair. Her left leg was turned inward, awkwardly, an old injury, perhaps. She wasn't smiling, but she was there. Maria. Lena stared at it for a long time before showing it to her. They were seated at the table in the mission sanctuary. Maria had just finished washing a handful of ripe figs for breakfast. When she saw the photo, her hands froze above the bowl. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice low, barely steady. "Ensenada," Lena said. "From a man who ran a supply shop. He said a visitor left it behind in 1986. Maria stared at the image. "I forgot that day," she whispered. "It was 2 days before we left for El Mirador. We were inspecting the chapel's walls for structural damage. I didn't want to be in the photo. I thought, maybe if I stayed out of the pictures, they'd let me go quietly when the time came." Her finger hovered over her own image. "But I was always there," she said, "just outside the frame of everything that mattered." Lena reached over and gently turned her hand over, resting it palm up on the table. "You mattered," she said. "You still do." Maria gave a small nod. Her thumb traced the corner of the photograph. "We were happy that day," she said. "Even Celeste. She joked that we looked like saints on break." She exhaled slowly. "I've run from this picture my entire life. But you left it behind for someone to find." A long silence. "I suppose I did." Later that afternoon, they walked to the edge of the cliffs. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, gray, blue, and gold in the shifting sun. The broken bell still lay where it had fallen. Maria stood next to it, her hand brushing its pocked surface. "You said earlier," Lena began, "that Celeste made you promise something, not in the letter. Before she died." Maria nodded. "She made me promise not to speak unless I knew someone would listen." "And you think I'm that someone?" "No," she said, turning to Lena. "I know you are." Lena's throat tightened. "What did she say?" Maria looked back toward the sea. "She said, 'Tell them we prayed, that we didn't run, that our silence wasn't shame, it was survival.'" Lena closed her eyes. She believed the church would one day listen. "And you?" Lena asked softly. "I believe people will." That evening, Lena took out her laptop and began scanning the photograph. As the image sharpened on the screen, she noted the details. A child in the background, half out of frame, barefoot and watching. A rosary draped across Celeste's wrist. A date etched faintly in the stone behind them. 1985, June 12th. 2 days before the mission. 2 days before they vanished. She created a new folder. 5th Sister Truth 001. Inside it, she placed the photo, the journal scans, the recorded interviews, the names that were never meant to be listed. And then, with quiet care, she opened a Word document. The 5th Sister, a true account of the 1985 mission disappearance by Lena Ruiz. The cursor blinked, waiting. She wrote the first sentence without hesitation. In every story the church refused to tell, there was always someone watching from the edge of the frame. In the quiet sanctuary, Maria lit 5 candles and whispered their names into the stillness. She didn't need a congregation. She had memory. She had prayer. And now, finally, she had witness. They sat in the small adobe study off the side of the mission. Lena typing on her laptop, Maria silently folding old altar linens. Sunlight spilled across the room in thin slants, catching dust in the air like golden ash. For the first time in decades, truth was being written down. Lena had typed through the night, shaping pages from interviews, journal fragments, archival letters, and Maria's first-hand accounts. But as the chapters grew, so did the weight of it all. This wasn't just a story about what had happened. It was a story about what had been allowed to happen and what had been silenced after. She paused and rubbed her eyes. "Maria," she said gently, "can I ask something you haven't spoken of yet?" Maria looked up, patient. "You may. What happened after you crossed the border? How did you decide to disappear completely?" Maria's fingers slowed, then stopped. "I was taken in by a former nun," she said. "Sister Inez. She ran a shelter for migrant women. No questions asked." "Did she know who you were?" "She knew enough. I told her what had happened, and she didn't flinch. Just made tea, said grief had no clock and neither did God." "She helped you vanish?" "She gave me a name no one would search for. She told me to go where I wouldn't be needed or found. So I came here." Lena leaned forward. "Weren't you afraid?" "Always," Maria said. "But I wasn't alone. I carried them all with me." She looked toward the open door, where the chapel's shadow touched the grass. "I came to believe that remembering them was better than pretending they never existed." A few days later, Lena received a call from a small historical preservation society in San Diego. She had submitted a sample of her manuscript anonymously under the title, "The Fifth Sister." The woman on the phone had a warm voice and a reverent tone. "Is it true?" she asked. "All of it?" "Yes," Lena said. "Every word." The woman was quiet for a moment. "We want to publish it, but more than that, we want to host a memorial." For all five, Lena's heart surged. "In the church?" "No," the woman replied. "Outside it, on the grounds of the old seminary, where people can choose to remember." 2 weeks later, Maria stood beside Lena at the unveiling. The event was small, quiet, respectful. An engraved stone marked the names of the 5 women: Sister Celeste Ruiz, Sister Rosa Mercado, Sister Amalia Villalobos, Sister Teresa Benitez Maria de los Angeles, known as Pilar, in unacknowledged service. Beneath their names, a single line: "Their silence was survival. Their memory is truth." No cardinals came, no bishops offered statements, but dozens gathered. Family, journalists, quiet clergy, and a handful of former nuns who whispered prayers in 3 languages. Maria wore a simple white shawl. She didn't speak publicly, but she stood. At the close of the ceremony, Lena read from the last chapter of her manuscript. "We remember not because they were lost. We remember because they were buried. And now, finally, they rise. In story, in truth, in name." She looked out at the crowd, eyes glassy with tears. "Celeste Ruiz was my aunt. She was not just a nun. She was a sister, a leader, a protector. And now, thanks to one woman's courage, we know she did not die forgotten." The wind lifted slightly. Somewhere behind her, Maria whispered a psalm into the breeze. That evening, the 2 women sat at the edge of a garden near the site. The sky burned orange and violet. "Will you keep writing?" Maria asked. "Yes," Lena said. "But not just about this, about others like you, who were erased." "And what about belief?" Lena smiled faintly. "I'm still figuring that part out." Maria nodded. "Then start with this. God may dwell in churches, but he moves through truth." In the final photograph of the day, Maria stood beside the memorial stone, her hand resting gently over the name she had never expected to see carved in public. Her own. A soft marine layer blanketed the morning, wrapping the crumbled edges of the old convent in a veil of fog. Lena stood just outside the ruins, dressed in a simple cream blouse and dark slacks, a small satchel over her shoulder. She wasn't here as a journalist, or a niece, or a historian. She was here as a witness. Dozens had gathered, some from local towns, others from as far as Mexico City and Los Angeles. Former clergy, retired nuns, students from nearby theological colleges. A few news outlets were present, but they stayed respectfully back. There were no headlines today, just remembrance. The memorial service was held on the grounds of Nuestra Señora de la Paz, where it all began, and where today it would be given its rightful ending. 5 white lilies had been placed at the cracked stone altar. Each one stood in a hand-carved vase. Beside them, 5 framed portraits rested on a linen-covered table. One of them had no formal record, no official vows, no death certificate, just a face once turned away from the camera and now finally centered. Maria de Los Angeles. Lena stepped forward, her voice calm but resonant. The crowd hushed. "We are gathered here not to rewrite history," she began, "but to restore it." She looked toward the aged stones behind her. In 1985, 5 women were sent on a mission of mercy. Only one returned. She returned wounded, silenced, and forgotten, not by God, but by those who should have protected her. She kept her promise. And now, so do we. She gestured gently toward the portraits. For Sister Rosa, who always smiled first. For Sister Amalia, who kept record of every child's name. For Sister Teresa, whose voice once filled the chapel with song. For Sister Celeste, who stood her ground when others fled. And for Maria, once called Pilar, who carried their memory through the years the world refused to see her. A soft breeze passed through the trees, lifting the corners of the linen. She was the 5th sister, and she was never lost, only hidden, long enough for the truth to survive. After the ceremony, people mingled quietly. Some placed flowers along the walls. Others lit candles in a new vigil corner Lena had helped create from repurposed bricks of the old rectory. Maria didn't speak. She stood near the back, dressed in gray, a white scarf tied neatly around her neck. She didn't need a platform. She had presence. When most of the crowd had gone, she walked alone to the altar, carrying a single folded cloth. She laid it beside the lilies. It was an old veil, the one she had worn in private the night she took her vows beside Celeste. She rested her hand upon it, then whispered something that no one heard, but everyone felt. That night, Lena returned to her apartment in San Diego. The story had gone quiet again, just as Maria had hoped. No press surge, no controversy, just quiet emails from women who had read The 5th Sister and said simply, "Thank you, I remember her now." In the final chapter of the book, Lena wrote, "Truth doesn't shout. It waits. In attics, in letters, in blood-stained pages. It waits for someone to listen. And when they do, the world tilts, just enough for a name to rise again." The sun crested the horizon behind the chapel ruins, flooding the cliffs with soft light. For the first time in years, the bells had rung again, though only recordings, played through discreet speakers nestled in the old mission wall. Still, the sound carried. It didn't matter if the bells were whole. What mattered was they were heard. Maria sat on the chapel steps, wrapped in her shawl, watching as Lena packed her things. She was leaving that afternoon, heading back to the States. The manuscript had gone to press. The memorial had been completed. The story, at least the part that could be told, was finished. And yet, something lingered in the silence between them. "You'll keep writing?" Maria asked quietly. Lena nodded. "Always. Not just our story?" "No," Lena said, smiling. "But it will always be part of every story I write." They sat for a while, listening to the sea. "Do you regret it?" Lena finally asked. "Staying silent all those years?" Maria traced a circle on the dusty stone step with her thumb. "No," she said. "I regret that it took someone else to break the silence, but I don't regret surviving, and I don't regret remembering." She looked at Lena, her voice firmer now. "I used to think I was the leftover, the one who didn't earn her cross or her vows or her portrait. But I see now, I was never alone in that cellar. I was never alone when I walked back through that border. And I wasn't alone here either." Lena leaned forward, her eyes misting. "We were always 5, Maria whispered. Lena reached into her bag and pulled out 5 tiny figurines she had carved during her weeks at the mission. They were simple. 5 faceless women, made of driftwood and sea-polished stone, each holding a small symbol: cross, candle, book, veil, and rosary. She placed them gently in Maria's hands. "One for each," she said. "None forgotten." That evening, as Lena boarded the bus out of Baja, she looked back one final time. The mission stood quiet against the setting sun, half in ruin, half reborn. A single candle flickered in the chapel window. Inside, Maria prayed alone, not out of habit, but from hope. Not because she had to, because she could. 6 months later, a small brass plaque was added to the side wall of Nuestra Señora de la Paz. It read, "In honor of the 5 sisters of El Mirador. They entered the shadows not to be remembered, but to serve. Their names endure, not because the world allowed it, but because one of them chose to return." Final lines from the book The Fifth Sister by Lena Ruiz. Every martyr is remembered by a name, a date, or a grave. But the forgotten are remembered by something harder to hold, the ache of an unfinished prayer. To remember is an act of justice. To believe them, an act of faith. And to tell their story is an act of love. For 40 years, her name was never spoken. They said only 4 nuns vanished in 1985. But she was the 5th, erased from church records, buried in silence. Until now. If you believe forgotten stories deserve to be heard, subscribe and help uncover the truths they tried to erase.